Welcome to the tutorial edition on knitting with beads. Today I'm going to show you how you can add beads to your knitting, and there's also a free pattern with 2 different swatches that you can try out 2 different methods of beading. There are 2 items that I highly recommend if you're going to do any beading, and one is a bead mat, which is right here, and what it is it's made of a fabric called Velux, so it has a fleecy feel to it and lots of tiny hairs on it. So if you spill your beads, they won't roll off the table, they'll stick right to the mat. The other item is a bead tray, and it's a very shallow tray that's really hard to tip over. And it's also got a fleecy material on the inside so the beads don't roll around all over the place. I also recommend this. You can try paper plates, paper bowls, plastic bowls, but if you knock them over, your beads are going to go everywhere. These are some examples of beads that you can use in knitting, and you can really use any bead you want as long as your yarn fits through the hole of the bead. Most typical for knitting with beads are size 6 and size 8 seed beads. The higher the number, the smaller the bead. These are size 6 seed beads, and these other ones up here are size 8. As you can see, these are a lot larger than these ones. Beads typically come in tubes, but they can come in a wide variety of tubes. Beads are sold by weight, but you do need to check with the vendor or the shop how much they have in a package. When they're sold by weight, there's X amount of beads per gram, and you just have to do some math to figure out how many beads are in the container if they're not telling you. So as you can clearly see, these tubes are drastically different. So you can't buy the same amount for the amount of the project you need. You really need to figure out how many beads are in. Like, this is a 10-gram container, and this one is a 40-gram container. That's a big difference. So you need to do a little bit of math. I've put that math on the pattern so you can figure out how many beads are in a container and how many beads you need for a project. This is another example of beads. These are bicones, so they're shaped a little bit differently. And there's a wide variety of beads. Again, just as long as your yarn fits through the hole of the bead, you can really use whatever you want. These are some examples of other beads, and here that hole is big enough for a lace weight and even a fingering weight yarn. If you wanted to, you could use whatever you want. Here are some examples of beaded knitting. I have a shawl that I did, and these beads are placed as you go along. And then I have some earrings and a necklace that I also did previously, and these beads are strung on and then pulled up as you need them to knit with them. This pattern is Bootin' by Laura Nelkin, and it's a great little one to test out beading. These are the 2 swatches for this tutorial, and this is Solano by Rosemary Hill. And there you can see all the beads placed on there. When you're choosing beads, the first thing to make sure is that they're high quality beads, especially if you're doing stranded beading. The bead has to slide on the yarn the entire time you're knitting, and you're going to continuously move the beads down the yarn so that you can knit the yarn. If the beads are a lower quality and the center holes are not smooth, they can actually rip up and tear your yarn. Japanese seed beads are typically a very high quality and very smooth and rounded, and there aren't any sharp edges. If you have some beads and you want to test it out, just take a strand of yarn, put some beads on, and slide the beads up and down the yarn several times, and you'll see if it starts affecting your yarn or ripping it or anything like that. It's not as important when you're placing individual beads, but it still is a little important because when you wash it and when you wear it, the bead can move up and down on the stitch and could still cause a problem. The next thing is choosing colors. You can have highly contrasting beads or very subtle beads. So it all depends on what you want. If you want the beads to really pop, or if you want them to just add some glitter and some nice interesting texture to your knitting. And that's really up to you. So that's the basic of beads. As long as the beads fit over your yarn, you can use whatever you'd like. If you like the way it looks, fantastic. So do you have to have a pattern that calls for beads in order to knit with beads? Absolutely not. I just made up these two swatches. There are other patterns out there. I have a mitt pattern that somebody that test knit it for me beaded. So you can really add beads to whatever you want. It's totally up to you. Another thing that I have available is an earring kit that comes with everything you need except for the knitting needles to make the earrings. And those are available for $5 in my Etsy shop. So if you think you want to try beading but you're not entirely sure, that's a very small investment to try that out. So you can also try something small. First thing you need to do is load some beads onto the Oral-B Superfloss. Here's one of these Superfloss pieces, and it has two different ends. There's a spongy bit in the middle, and there's a stiffer end that's shorter, and then there's an end that's more like traditional dental floss that will cut, because this is really long, and you'll see what I mean when we start actually beading. So to load it is super easy. I have my bead tray here with some beads in it, and I'm taking the stiff end and I'm just gonna poke right in the center of the bead, and it's gonna pop right on. And you can load up a couple more. And then pull it onto the spongy thicker bit, and they won't go anywhere. So really, if you wanted to do beading that was travel knitting, you could most definitely do that. You could load up this entire length with beads. You can tie a knot in the end if you want so it doesn't come off, but really they don't come off at all. And I use this finer end to load the beads, so I usually don't put a knot on it. And that's how simple it is to load beads onto Superfloss. We'll do a couple more. And you don't have to pick them up. Just pop them right on there. And they jump right on. So to place the beads, I would cut this really long end so that I had something to fold over and insert into my stitches. You can cut it as long as you want. I usually start out a little bit longer because as you keep shoving beads down onto the knit stitch, the end becomes a little frayed. And as I'm working it, I keep just snipping off the end so that I have a nice smooth end to work with. And that's how you load Oral-B Superfloss. Now we're going to start knitting from the swatch. You should have cast on 29 stitches and knit 3 rows of garter stitch for the border. And you need 2 stitch markers, some beads on the Oral-B Superfloss, and the instructions. And what I do when I'm sitting stationary is I just take a ruler and rest it on the chart and then move it up as I need to. When I walk away though, I use this highlighter tape little tab to mark off whatever row that I was on, because that won't come off. The ruler won't stay put if I walk away from my desk. I'm sure it will get bumped. So that's how I deal with lace knitting when I'm sitting at my desk. So we are ready to start the swatch here. So what we're going to do is on the first row, we're going to place the markers that are indicated by the blue lines here. And then you can see the other border that's used in the chart is where you're going to place a bead. So every time we work this stitch, we're going to place a bead after we work it. After you've knit the first 2 rows on the chart, the first one being the lace one, and then the next one being the purl back row. You should have your markers marking your 3 edge stitches on either side, and you should have some eyelets in there now. And now we're on row number 3, which is where we're going to place some beads. And now we're to the stitches that we're going to place the beads on. First we're going to decrease them so that we have 1 stitch to place the bead on. And this particular decrease is a slip 1, knit 2 together, pass slip stitch over. So we're going to slip 1 knitwise, knit 2 together, split the stitch. I like to do that a lot. I'm going to pass my slip stitch over, and now I have 1 stitch to place the bead on. So what I do is I put it on the left hand needle because that's easier for me. And then you want to take your Superfloss, and you want the more flexible end to work from, not the hard end that we use to put the beads on. We want the other end. And you just want to slip the stitch. You're going to put the beads on there. Slip it off the needle. Then you want to fold over the Superfloss so that you can slip the bead over both ends. You want to slide a bead down over both ends like that. And then just pull it down to your stitch and then slide it over your stitch. Then you can put your stitch back on the needle. Just make sure you don't twist it when you do that. You can slide this out, and now you're ready to continue. Just remember that you've already worked this stitch, so put it back on that needle. It might be very loose because of what you just did to it, so just pull it tight. And then you can continue. And now we're at the next area that we're going to do it, so you can see it again. So first we have to decrease the stitches. So slip 1, knit 2 together, pass slip stitch over. I like to slip it to the left hand needle. Get your Superfloss. Through the stitch. Now you can pull the stitch off the needle. Fold it over on itself. Slide down a bead. Over both ends. Gets a little tricky sometimes when the floss is used a lot. The best thing to do is just cut the end off. I don't know if the camera will show it, but that's a little frayed at this point. And pull it tight. Slip your bead onto your stitch. Put your stitch back on the needle. You've already worked it, just put it back over there and pull it tight. And that is how you place beads with Superfloss. And that is the way I definitely prefer. I will knit some more rows on this and then come back and show you how to place them with a crochet hook, which is not my preferred method, but it is possible, and some people prefer that way. So at this point, I'm on the next row that would have beads, and I said I would show you how to use a crochet hook. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mime how you use a crochet hook, because this is why I don't use a crochet hook. So here's my stitch that I just decreased that requires a bead. Now, the reason I don't like to use crochet hooks is I typically do lace weight with beading with fingering weight yarn and size 8 beads. In order to use a crochet hook, you need to use a crochet hook where the head actually fits through the bead, and you can see how small that is. That's just crazy. But that's the size head that will fit through the bead. The problem with that is I can't hook the yarn with this tiny of a hook. It's just not possible to then get the bead over the yarn. If you have thicker yarn and a crochet hook and larger beads, this works pretty well. So what you would do is what I just did. You would just scoop up the bead with the crochet hook like that, and then you would hook your stitch that you wanted to place the bead on. Then you would slide the bead over the yarn, over the hook, and down onto the stitch, just like we did with the Superfloss. But because this crochet hook is so tiny, I really can't even keep hold of the yarn with it, so that's why I don't prefer that method. So now that you've seen how to place beads, you can finish your swatch, and I will come back later and show you how to block your swatch so that the lace looks lovely. Because right now it doesn't look too bad, but blocking will definitely open up the lace pattern, even out the stitches, and make it really, really nice. Like if you were doing a shawl or something, you would definitely have to block it.